Good evening, I'm Azazel, and welcome to another installment of Ghostly Japan. Tonight's episode is part 2 of this two-part series on Taira no Masakado and his Kubizuka. In the last episode, we discussed the real-life history of Taira no Masakado, his ill-fated rebellion and short-lived empire, which resulted in his eventual death. When we left off, his disembodied head had flown off on its own accord from Heian, modern-day Kyoto, back to the Kanto region. The head had run out of energy, though, and landed in the sleepy fishing village of Shibasaki, where the terrified locals buried it, the origins of Masakadozuka. However, Masakado's vengeful spirit had become an onryo, and was now terrorizing the villagers, and also causing disease and natural disasters to befall the residents. A wandering Buddhist priest by the name of Shinkyo has heard of this, and is on his way to render aid. Tonight on Ghostly Japan. In 1307, a Buddhist priest of the Jishu sect by the name of Shinkyo came to the grave mound after hearing tales of how Masakado's spirit was terrorizing the locals. An epidemic was spreading that was believed to be a curse from Masakado. The priest erected a gravestone on the mound and gave Masakado his posthumous Buddhist name. The nearby Nichirinji temple, which was of the Tendai sect, was impressed by the priest's work and persuaded to convert to the Jishu sect. Afterwards, they took over care of Masakadozuka. In 1309, the nearby Shinto shrine, Kanda-myojin, which enshrined Onamuchi, also known as Daikokuten, enshrined Masakado, adding his Mikoto alongside that of Onamuchi's as enshrined deities. As an enshrined deity, Masakado was said to protect people from natural disasters and harm. Despite the lingering fears of Masakado's curse from some, with the enshrinement and deification of Masakado, people came to pray at Masakadozuka and at Kanda-myojin. Given Masakado's martial prowess in life, specifically how he numerous times managed to defeat opponents fielding much larger forces, it became popular among bushi and samurai of the region to come and pray, hoping that Masakado's blessing would aid them on the field of battle. Masakado's story of struggle against imperial authority also found popularity among the samurai during this period, as the balance of power had shifted to the samurai with the establishment of the shogunate as the real holder of power in Japan. As the country entered into the turbulent Sengoku period, this became even more common, and a number of prominent samurai and even daimyos such as Ota Dokan and Hojo Ujitsuna are said to have prayed here on the eve of a major battle. However, the most prominent and important of which is that of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the legendary founder of the Tokugawa shogunate. It is claimed in the lead-up to the final battle at Sekigahara, the priests and worshippers at Kanda-myojin prayed daily for Tokugawa's victory in the coming battle. As fate would have it, the decisive battle would be fought on October 21st, 1600, or, according to the lunar calendar, the 15th day of the 9th month in the 5th year of Keicho. The very same day, the Kanda festival is held at Kanda-myojin. Ieyasu famously won the Battle of Sekigahara, paving the way to the formation of the Tokugawa shogunate, which lasted for over 2.5 centuries. Ieyasu made Edo Castle the center of his newly created shogunate, embarking on an extensive project of reclaiming land from Tokyo Bay to expand the Edo Castle grounds. This project began in 1593 and would be completed in 1636 under Ieyasu's grandson, Tokugawa Iemitsu. As a consequence of this project, land was reclaimed around Masakadozuka, pushing the shoreline closer to its modern-day boundary. The neighborhood around Masakadozuka became the site of many of the mansions of the various prominent high-ranking samurai and daimyos, as the neighborhood was right next to Edo Castle. The land around Masakadozuka specifically was taken up by the Sakai clan. The new shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu must have found it particularly auspicious that his decisive victory at Sekigahara occurred on the same day as the Kanda festival, as the Tokugawa clan would become long-standing patrons of Kanda-myojin. In 1616, he had Kanda-myojin and Nichirinji Temple relocated from their original position in the former Shibasaki village to their current location northeast of Edo Castle, which was his residence and headquarters at the time. Specifically, he had Kanda Shrine placed in a spot called the Omote Kimon, the front demon gate. In Onmyodo, a system of cosmology and philosophy that had its roots in China, evil, negative energy, and bad luck was said to enter from the northeast direction. Kanda Myojin's emplacement at the Demon's Front Gate was meant to shield Edo Castle from any evil spirits or bad luck that might come, making Kanda Myojin the guardian shrine of Edo. Kanda is an interesting choice for this task, though, as it enshrines Masakado, who was considered an enemy of the emperor. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, legends and tales of Masakado's exploits flourished, being featured in artwork, various performances, and plays. During this period, versions of Masakado's story spread that claimed that the reason he had rebelled was because the common people of the Kanto region were being exploited and abused by the imperial court, and as such he had rebelled to protect his people, painting Masakado in a far more altruistic light than before. Some of the stories also gave Masakado and members of his family supernatural powers. Masakado himself was in some depictions imbued with frog magic, an association that continues in his legend even today. Such stories also attempted to explain what became of Masakado's children after his death. One of the more famous tales involves his daughter, Satsuki-hime, Princess Satsuki. The basic gist, spoilers incoming for this nearly 2-century-old tale, is Satsuki-hime survives the emperor's purge of the Masakado family. Enraged by the death of her family members, she vows to continue on her father's rebellion. To this end, she goes every night to the Kibune shrine during the Hour of the Ox, that's from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., to perform a curse ritual called Ushi no Toki Mairi. This ritual requires her to nail a doll into a sacred tree at the shrine while dressed in a white gown and wearing an iron trivet with lit candles attached to it. She must perform this ritual in secret, night after night. Finally, after many nights of dutifully performing the curse, she makes contact with the Aramitama of the Kibune shrine. In traditional Shinto belief, each soul or god is composed of 4 aspects or sub-souls: the Aramitama, the Nigimitama, the Sakimitama, and the Kushimitama. The Aramitama, the soul's wild, violent, and wrathful side, transforms Satsuki-hime into a sorceress and empowers her with frog magic, telling her that her name from now on will be Takiyasha-hime. With her newfound powers, she returns to Shimosa province, to her father's ruined fortress. There she puts word for any loyal warriors of her father to come out of hiding and join her in continuing the fight. To her dismay, she finds the Emperor's agents have been very effective, and very few of her father's soldiers remain alive. Meanwhile, the Imperial Court has gotten wind of the strange happenings occurring in the old stronghold of Taira no Masakado. An Imperial agent, Yamashiro Mitsunari, is dispatched to investigate. The climax of the story finds Yamashiro entering the ruins of the castle where Takiyasha-hime is hiding. While she has no living warriors to fight alongside her, this being the battlefield where her father's forces were defeated, she only needs to look beneath her feet for allies. Reading from a magical scroll, she raises the fallen Masakado warriors, now skeletons, to fight once more. There's a fierce battle as Yamashiro does battle with hundreds of skeletons, but eventually the Emperor's agent is victorious and Takiyasha-hime is defeated. The climax of the story is famously immortalized in a woodblock print by artist Udagawa Kuniyoshi, although he took a little artistic license and changed the hundreds of skeletal warriors into one big skeleton called a gasha dokuro. There are a couple of variations of this story, one which includes Masakado's eldest son, Taira no Yoshikado, who survives the initial purge and works alongside his sister to bring back their father's empire. In some stories, Takiyasha-hime rides on the back of a giant toad, making the frog magic aspect a bit more literal. Many of these stories continue to be performed today, especially in traditional arts. Adding on to the supernatural tales from this era, the proposed birth year of 903 for Masakado is tied into the legend that Masakado is the reincarnation of Sugawara no Michizane, incidentally one of the other 3 big Onryo of Japan, since this is the year that Michizane died. Michizane also was in conflict with the imperial court, and thus, according to legend, Masakado's rebellion was in fact a continuation of Michizane's conflict. In the early 1670s, the Sakai clan estate, which had been built around Masakadozuka, was the scene of a famous incident. The resident of the property during this time was Sakai Tadakio, who was the title at the time. The title was an extremely high-ranking position in the shogunate, virtually second only to the shogun himself. The title was empowered to make decisions on behalf of the shogun should he become incapacitated, and also oversaw the Roju Council. The title was selected from the Fudai daimyo, the daimyo from clans that were vassals of the Tokugawas before the Battle of Sekigahara. It was in his capacity as title that Sakai Tadakio took on the matter of the brewing Date clan family feud. The crisis originated in 1660 when the then 20-year-old Date clan daimyo, Date Tsunamune, was arrested in Edo for drunkenness and debauchery. Members of the Date clan, led by Tsunamune's uncle, Date Munekatsu, appealed to the council to replace Tsunamune as daimyo on account of his poor behavior. The shogunate agreed and forced Tsunamune to retire and named his 1-year-old son, Date Tsunamura, as the new daimyo. Date Munekatsu and Tamura Muneyoshi, another uncle of Tsunamune's, were named regents for the infant daimyo. The next decade for the Date domain was marked by instability and flashes of periodic violence. In 1671, Date Muneshige, also known as Aki Muneshige, appealed to the shogunate to intervene, accusing Munekatsu and Muneyoshi of mismanagement. The shogunate summoned the involved parties to Edo to give their statements. The first hearing was led by council member Tsuchiya Kazunao and was held on the grounds of the Itakura estate, another council member. No decision could be reached on the matter, as discrepancies between the statements of members opposing Munekatsu and Muneyoshi and those supporting the two regents could not be resolved. However, the statements made by a senior retainer of Date Munekatsu, Harada Munesuke, in support of his lord, are said to have left a particularly poor impression on the investigators. A second hearing was held 20 days later to further investigate the matter. The second hearing was originally supposed to be held at the Itakura estate again, but was changed to the Sakai estate at the last minute. Tairo Sakai would personally preside over the hearing, and the entire council was to sit on it as well. At one point in the hearing, Date Aki Muneshige was in the main chambers giving his testimony, when Harada Munesuke arrived and entered the waiting room. As Harada overheard the discussion in the next room, he became increasingly agitated as he listened to the statements. After Aki Muneshige was dismissed, he entered the room Harada had been waiting in. Reportedly, as soon as he entered the room, Harada confronted him, hurling insults at Aki. The argument escalated quickly, and before anyone could intervene, Harada drew his sword and struck Aki dead. As Aki's lifeless body falls to the ground, Harada begins charging towards the main chambers. Two other samurai, Hachiya Yoshihiro and Shibata, who had been standing in the waiting room, drew their swords and moved to block the enraged Harada. The sounds of the fighting drew the attention of the title's guards, who raced into the room, and in the confusion of the moment, the guard engages all three men. Harada was killed in the fight, while both Shibata and Hachiya were fatally wounded. Spilling of blood in the house of the title was already a massive infraction, but it was made even more grave since it occurred during the official course of business of the shogunate. Harada was already dead, but that wasn't enough to address such an egregious breach of law. Harada's family line was ordered to be destroyed. All males of adult age were ordered to commit seppuku, and all male children and grandchildren were beheaded. Harada's mother, wife, and daughters were split up and sent into the care of various other families. In the end, the shogunate decided in favor of Aki Muneshige's faction, stripping both regents, Muneyoshi and Munekatsu, of their stations, power, and lands. The adolescent Date daimyo, Tsunamura, was found not liable given his age and was left in power. This story became a popular subject for Edo period plays. It also is the subject of a famous novel serialized between 1954 and 1958, Mominoki no Kota by Yamamoto Shugoro. Within occult circles, some claim that the events that transpired on the grounds of the Sakai estate was due to the Sakai clan's neglect of the Masakadozuka, thus triggering the curse. However, this is certainly not a mainstream interpretation, nor particularly well known. While the allegation that the Sakai clan neglected Masakadozuka and hence triggered his terrible curse is debatable, if not a bit dubious, Masakado's Mikoto was certainly not neglected at Kanda Myojin. The shrine continued to venerate the Mikoto of Masakado alongside the other enshrined deities at Kanda, and the Kanda Matsuri, or festival, came to become one of the 3 big festivals of Edo. The festival was a big event and featured, among other activities, a procession that would parade around Edo. The heart of the parade were the mikoshi. A mikoshi is a sacred palanquin that is used in Shinto festivals. The enshrined deity of the shrine is said to ride in the mikoshi. Masakado's mikoshi was but one of the many mikoshi that made up this parade. As the parade made its way around Edo, floats created by parishioners in that section of town would join the procession. The Kanda Matsuri is still held today, and a replica of the mikoshi that was used in the Edo period has been used since 2005. The fall of the Tokugawa shogunate and the return of imperial power with the Meiji Restoration in 1868 brought the next change in Masakado's mythos. With the Meiji Restoration, the emperor's residence was moved from Kyoto to Tokyo, taking over the grounds of Edo Castle. The former seat of power of the Tokugawa shogunate became the new imperial palace. Chokusaisha are Shinto shrines that are designated by the imperial court to receive imperial representatives for the purpose of praying for protection and prosperity. This system had existed in Kyoto with the old imperial palace, and when the new imperial palace was established in Edo, 12 Tokyo shrines were selected to be part of the newly formed Junchokusaisha. There was public expectation for Kanda Shrine to be included among the 12. However, the presence of Taira no Masakado as an enshrined deity at Kanda Shrine gave the imperial court pause. The emperor, it was expected, would make visits to these shrines, and the emperor visiting a shrine where the spirit of an enemy to the imperial court was deified was considered unacceptable. As such, in 1874, the Mikoto of Taira no Masakado was quietly moved from Kanda Shrine to a small new shrine called Masakado Shrine. In its place, the Mikoto of Sukahiko-na, better known as Ebisu, was brought from a shrine in Hitachi province to Kanda Shrine. Masakadozuka, Masakado Shrine, and the myriad other shrines devoted to Taira no Masakado continued the tradition of worship and praying to Masakado's Mikoto for good luck established in earlier centuries. However, the Meiji and Taisho era saw a resurgence of the more villainous, supernatural, and antagonistic depictions of Masakado. Many of the more well-known supernatural claims associated with Masakadozuka in the modern era originate from this period. Perhaps the most well-known depiction of Masakado's curse is the story that starts with the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake which devastated Tokyo. The area around Masakadozuka, Otemachi, was not spared from the devastation. No longer home to daimyo and high-ranking samurai, as this whole system had been done away with during the early Meiji period, Otemachi had fallen into possession of the Japanese government, and by the time of the 1923 earthquake was the home of many of the various government ministry buildings. The land around Masakadozuka specifically was home to the Ministry of Finance. Like so many other parts of Tokyo, Otemachi was completely destroyed by the earthquake and subsequent fires. However, Masakadozuka escaped significant damage, and period photograph show Masakado's grave mound with its prominent stone monument on top, standing out amidst the sea of rubble. The Ministry of Finance had burned down during the earthquake. A temporary building was needed for the ministry's employees to operate out of, as the rebuilding of Tokyo would take time. For some reason, the decision was made to level the grave mound and build the temporary building on top of the site. Luckily, before the mound was raised, archaeologists were allowed to examine the mound. Their report theorized that the mound might actually predate Taira no Masakado's death, and a burial chamber was believed to exist under the mound. It was also noted that there were similarities between Masakadozuka and other larger grave mounds found in Japan dating back to the Kofun era, 300 to 538 CE. Shortly after construction was finished in 1924, a number of individuals connected to the construction began to die in seemingly inexplicable accidents or illnesses one after the other. Among the dead was the construction project manager, who passed in 1927, and even the Minister of Finance, Hayami Seiji, who passed suddenly in 1926. Although, it should be pointed out, Minister Hayami was not the minister in charge in 1923 when the decision was made to pave over Masakadozuka. The workers in the temporary building also complained of strange, unexplainable bodily aches, especially foot pain. Fear was rampant in the Ministry of Finance as rumors swirled that the deaths and other odd maladies affecting the workers were due to Masakado's curse. The ministry caved to the employee demands to address Masakado's curse in 1927 by rebuilding Masakadozuka, although the prominent mound was not restored. A Shinto service was held after the new Masakadozuka was completed in hopes to quell Masakado's angered spirit. Unfortunately for the ministry, Masakado's spirit seems to have not been completely quelled, as in 1940, during a storm, lightning struck the government district, sparking a long-arch fire, burning down the Ministry of Finance and several other government agencies. During the bombing raids of Tokyo in 1945, Otemachi would once again be destroyed, leaving the whole district, including Masakadozuka, buried in rubble. In the immediate aftermath of the end of World War II, Allied occupation authorities designated Otemachi for a proposed motor pool facility for occupation forces. Masakadozuka fell in what was to be the parking lot. According to some, including the local historical society that preserves Masakadozuka, when the construction workers began clearing the grounds of Masakadozuka, the bulldozer struck something and flipped over, killing the operator. The object the bulldozer had struck turned out to be part of an underground stone crypt or foundation that had been part of the mound. Additionally, before this incident, a number of other construction workers who had been preparing the site had been injured in odd accidents. Local residents who remembered the tales of Masakado's curse became wary that this was what was happening. A town elder by the name of Endo Masazo approached local occupation authorities and pleaded with them to spare Masakadozuka. He was able to successfully convince them to spare the site, and began the initial work of restoring the site himself by erecting some simple bamboo fences to protect what remained of the grave. For the next nearly 15 years, the restoration and preservation of the site was an unofficial undertaking by local community members and organizations. In July of 1960, the Historical Preservation Society was formally created with the backing of corporate entities that had set up in Otemachi. Two of the more prominent backers were the Mitsui Life Insurance Company and the Long-Term Credit Bank of Japan. Construction of the first modern renovation of Masakadozuka began in 1965, with the first Shinto ceremony at the newly refurbished Masakadozuka conducted by priests in December of that year. Early 1966 saw the addition of stone walls to enclose the gravesite, along with new landscaping work. This type of renovation work would periodically be carried out at Masakadozuka. In 1976, NHK chose Taira no Masakado's tale as the subject of their annual historical drama, also known as taiga dramas. The 1976 series was called Kaze to Kumo to Nijito, Wind, Clouds, and Rainbow. The series proved to be popular with audiences and led to a surge in tourism at sites that were associated with Masakado. While Masakado's story had never faded from cultural memory, for example the Edo period stories had continued to be a staple of traditional forms of entertainment such as bunraku and kabuki, Kaze to Kumo to Nijito's popularity brought the story back into modern popular culture. Additionally, the production of the show introduced another part of the modern Masakadozuka lore. It had been customary for the casts of NHK's taiga dramas to participate in the annual Setsubun event at the Narita-san Shinshoji, a Buddhist temple in Chiba Prefecture. However, the cast of Kaze to Kumo to Nijito declined to do so, because Narita-san Shinshoji had historically been a temple that had supported Masakado's enemies, and had prayed actually for his defeat on the eve of his final battle. This stems from a belief that if one wishes to gain Masakado's blessing by visiting his shrines, that visiting Narita-san Shinshoji will cause your wish to backfire and instead incur Masakado's curse. This practice of casts and productions depicting Taira no Masakado avoiding Narita-san Shinshoji has continued to this day. In 1983, the legend of the curse of Taira no Masakado would once again emerge into popular culture, this time taking center stage in Aramata Hiroshi's novel Teito Monogatari, a work of dark fantasy historical fiction, beginning in the Meiji period in the late 1800s and spanning all the way to the climax set in 1998. The The story revolves around an Imperial Japanese army officer, Kato Yasunori, who is in reality an Oni with an ancient grudge against the Japanese people. Central to Kato's plan for revenge is his intention to awaken the spirit of Taira no Masakado, in the hope of using Masakado's vengeful nature to destroy Tokyo. Through the novel's epic timescale, the story weaves into the narrative real-life historical figures and events, giving many real-life historical events a supernatural occult connection in the context of the novel. Teito Monogatari would find great popularity in Japan, leading to the launching of a veritable franchise of live-action movie, anime, and manga adaptations. The novel itself was influential, in that it introduced into modern Japanese popular culture esoteric Chinese and Japanese occult beliefs, such as Onmyodo and Feng Shui. Teito Monogatari's contribution to the modern Japanese supernatural genre can be seen to this day in the oft-present inclusion of elements of Eastern occultism in modern Japanese works, whether they be movies, novels, or anime. In 1988, Teito Monogatari would get the silver screen treatment with a live-action adaptation. The film was a commercial success, and the portrayal of the character Kato Yasunori by actor Shimada Kyusaku would also become influential in its own right. Aramata was so impressed by Shimada's portrayal of the character that in subsequent editions of the novel, description of the character's appearance was rewritten to match Shimada's portrayal. This iconic image of the character Kato Yasunori, as played by Shimada, is credited with inspiring the character design of numerous other villainous characters in Japanese media, but I digress. It's here during the production of the movie adaptation that the movie itself becomes part of the real-life lore of the Masakado legend. Allegedly, the production of the film was plagued by a number of unexplained accidents. In one instance, some equipment was said to have suddenly fallen and injured a crew member underneath. In another case, a fire supposedly broke out on set. Luckily, no deaths are alleged to have occurred as a result of these mishaps. Whether these incidents really occurred on set or not is unclear. However, the lingering rumors of such mishaps may account for why some cast and crews of Masakado-related productions come to pay their respects at Masakadozuka. Perhaps partially because of the resurgence in popularity of media about Taira no Masakado, in 1984, the decision was made to re-enshrine Masakado's Mikoto at Kanda Shrine, bringing him home after a 110-year absence from Kanda Shrine following that 1874 move to Masakado Shrine. There are a number of modern aspects of Masakadozuka lore that likely originated sometime in the last few decades of the 20th century. Such as the claim that the companies that occupied the buildings overlooking Masakadozuka forbid their employees from sitting with their backs turned towards the grave, lest the company incur the wrath of Masakado's slumbering spirit. Or the claim that touching Masakado's gravestone would cause bad luck or even death. Many of these beliefs revolve around the concept that showing disrespect towards Masakado's spirit will cause some form of ill omen to the offender. One of the more extreme examples of this is the often repeated story of an executive from one of the companies neighboring the gravesite, who after becoming intoxicated at a nomikai, stumbles into Masakadozuka and relieves himself on the gravestone. The next morning, the executive is found dead. Many variations of this tale have been told over the years. The company the executive works for changes, or sometimes instead of being found dead, the executive gets diagnosed with a terminal illness at his next checkup. In any event, the message is clear. Disrespect Taira no Masakado at your own peril. One of the more curious parts of the modern lore revolves around Masakadozuka and the numerous frog figures and statues that adorn the gravesite, or at least did until the most recent renovation in 2021. More on that in a moment. This practice likely originates from an incident that occurred in November of 1986, when the New People's Army, a militant branch of the Communist Party of the Philippines, took Wakaoji Nobuyuki, the chief of the Manila branch of Mitsui & Co., hostage. The Mitsui Company had their Tokyo offices in one of the buildings near Masakadozuka, and it is claimed that concerned employees began coming to the gravesite to pray for Wakaoji's safe return. It's not known who started the practice of bringing frog paraphernalia as an offering to Masakadozuka. It's possible the practice predates the 1986 Manila hostage case, but in any event, given the long association of frogs or toad magic and Masakado's family from those Edo-era stories, and that frog in Japanese, kairu, sounds similar to the Japanese word for return, kairu, it wasn't long before a veritable army of frogs appeared around Masakadozuka. 4 months later, in early 1987, Wakaoji would be released from captivity and returned to Japan. Whether that was thanks to the countless frog statues left at Masakadozuka, or the $10 million ransom that was paid for his release, I leave for you to decide. Ever since the Manila hostage case, it has been customary for those Japanese business people nervous about traveling overseas on business to come to Masakadozuka and pray, and to leave a frog offering in the hopes of a safe return. This practice also extends to those company workers who have been transferred to an undesirable posting, usually one very remote and far from home. In Japan, where until recent times layoffs were, relatively speaking, rare, it was and is sometimes still a known practice that companies will post employees they want to get rid of to some far-off undesirable branch or office in the hopes that said employee will voluntarily quit rather than make the transfer. For those employees who found themselves in these situations and who want to try to salvage their careers, it is said that praying at Masakadozuka and leaving a frog offering can help them reverse their fortunes and return back home to their home office. With the 2021 renovation of Masakadozuka, all of the frog statues were removed save for 2 small figures flanking either side of the grave. The authorities kindly request that anyone wishing to make a frog offering do so at Kanda Shrine from now on. That brings us to the present day. There still are reports by some individuals of supernatural activity at the gravesite, although modern-day reports are quite different from the historical claims of Masakado's disembodied floating head terrorizing villagers. Today, reports principally fall into 2 categories: apparitions and physical symptoms experienced by visitors after the fact. The apparitions do not have a single form, other than that they appear to be otherwise normal-looking, modern people. Sometimes it's a middle-aged man or an old woman, other times a child, but the reports go something like this. The person is walking towards Masakadozuka. Up ahead, they see someone walk up the steps into the gravesite and out of view. When the person reaches the steps and looks into the grounds, no one is there. Given that there is only one access point to Masakadozuka, the person is led to believe that they just witnessed a ghost. The other type of apparition involves seeing a person standing next to you or sitting on the bench and then vanishing in the next moment. The other type of report is folks reporting some kind of change in feeling. Some claim to feel an ominous or heavy feeling in the air once they step into the gravesite. Some claim that in the days after visiting Masakadozuka, they experience headaches, stomach aches, sore throats, or coughing. Most of these types of reports are made by individuals identifying themselves as psychics or otherwise supernaturally gifted. Masakadozuka is many things to different people. For some, it's a terrifying haunted location. For others, it's a revered spiritual site of a guardian deity of Tokyo. Others, a site of cultural and historical importance. And yet for others, it's a quiet spot where one can catch their breath and reflect in an otherwise busy and quick-moving financial district. Whatever the grave means to the people who visit it, its influence extends far beyond Otemachi. The legend of Taira no Masakado and his Kubizuka has influenced modern pop culture, and even if you've never heard of Masakado or his legend, you've almost certainly consumed some piece of Japanese cultural export that has been influenced or shaped by it. Despite occupying some of the most expensive real estate in the world, it's a safe bet that Masakado's Kubizuka, given its cultural and historical impact, will continue to exist in its current location as it has for the past 1,000-some-odd years. And after all, is it really worth risking awakening the sleeping spirit of Taira no Masakado? Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel for more such videos. Thanks again, and see you in the next installment of Ghostly Japan.